Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. It's Tuesday, May 21st at 7 p.m. It's a regular meeting of council of Adelaide Metcalfe. Is there any declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof? Okay, seeing none. You've had a chance to read the minutes of the previous meeting from May the 6th. I noticed a typo and I'll point it out to you later. It's not significant. Anybody else? Okay, seeing none, could I have a motion to adopt those minutes, please? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon, all in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, we have a recommendation that council convene as the Committee of Adjustment at 7:02 p.m. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Kingma, all in favor, and that's carried. The purpose of the following Committee of Adjustment is to give the Committee of Adjustment and the general public an opportunity to hear all interested parties with respect to the application being heard this evening. The public is advised that comments expressed and written material presented are a matter of public record available for full disclosure. Only the applicant or a public body can appeal a Committee of Adjustment decision to the Ontario Land Tribunal. This must be filed within 20 days from the date of the decision. If you wish to be notified of the decision in writing, please submit a written request to the clerk. Okay, the first item of business is an application for consent B05-2024, Bass Tim Inc. and Mark Bastianson from 9219 Townsend Line. And at this time, I'll turn it over to our planner, Aaron Bash.
Mayor Clark. I'm going to share my screen here, bring up the first location map. Thank you, committee. The first and only application we have before you this evening, again, is application B5-2024. It's to permit the severance of a residence from a larger farm parcel, which has been deemed surplus to the needs of a farming operation. The subject property itself is approximately 32.4 hectares and 80 acres in size. It's located on the south side of Townsend Line. It is considered a through lot in that it also has frontage onto Langan Drive to the south. The applicant is proposing a severance of a lot that is approximately 50 meters in width, which is the frontage, considered the frontage of the property, with a lot area of 0.81 hectares or 2 acres. The lands proposed to be severed contain an existing single detached dwelling constructed in 2014. It is privately serviced with a septic system. However, I did indicate in my report that it had private water as well, but that is incorrect. It is actually on municipal water. The lands also contain a Quonset hut and garden shed, which are both used for personal storage purposes. And the lands also have an existing driveway onto Townsend Line. The proposed lands to be retained, which are the farm parcel lands, they are primarily in crop production. They also contain a portion of the Zimmerman Drain along the southernmost property line adjacent to Langan Drive. The lands also contain an area of significant woodland near the center of the lot, and a portion of which is regulated by the Asable Bayfield Conservation Area. So I will switch my location map to the residential lot so you can get a little bit more context. The application was circulated as per the requirements of the Planning Act. The chief building official requested that confirmation be received that the septic system is wholly contained on the severed lands. The county engineer advised that the owner would be required to dedicate lands up to 15 meters from the center line of construction of County Road 12 across both the severed and retained parcels, and that is for purposes of road widening if it is not already to that width. Township Drainage Superintendent advised that no drainage reapportionment is needed. No comments from the CA. Public Works Manager also advised of no concerns. Enbridge does have service lines in the area, so we are advising the applicant that if the proposed severance impacts these services, it will be up to them to have the line relocated. The Middlesex County Safety and Standards Officer gave our standard comment of retaining the 911 address for the house and assigning a new 911 address for the farmland. And no public comments were received. So my analysis of the application, I'm satisfied that farm consolidation has been achieved. The applicant has indicated the dwelling is in very good condition and is currently occupied. We have updated our County of Middlesex surplus farm dwelling timelines. It used to be January 1st of 1999, but it was recently updated to at least 10 years. So as the house was constructed in 2014, we are just meeting that 10-year period, but we have confirmed that it is at least 10 years old. The septic system is contained on the lands to be severed, and of course the water service is municipal. I'm comfortable that the size and shape of the lot is appropriate in order to accommodate the dwelling, accessory buildings, and private service. The Quonset hut itself exceeds the permitted size for accessory building within the surplus dwelling zone. However, that can be recognized in a site-specific zone provision when the rezoning application comes forward, so no issue with that. And of course, the rezoning will restrict the surplus dwelling lot to only like a rural residential property. No agriculture will be permitted on that land. And of course, the larger farm parcel will be restricted from having future residents located on it as well. There is a portion of the property that is zoned environmental protection, and that is not proposed to be changed during the rezoning application. And of course, once we have the reference plan that is required as one of the recommended conditions, we will confirm that there's adequate setbacks between all of the structures and the septic system as well. If there are any deficiencies, again, that can be identified through a site-specific SD zone. So my recommendation this evening is approval subject to the 11 conditions. They're all standard surplus farm dwelling consent conditions, aside from number 5, which of course we include anytime there is a property on a county road, and that's for the land dedication. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. Is there anyone in the gallery that wishes to speak for the application? Is there anybody that do you want to speak for it, or you have?
I'm comfortable with what Erin said.
Just come up. Yeah, push the microphone there so Erin can hear you. Especially if it's favorable. No, I'm just kidding.
I am Mark Bastianson, the applicant. Erin was very thorough with her description. I have nothing to comment on except just to answer questions if there are any.
Okay. So, Council, are there any questions for Mark or for Erin? No? Okay. Seeing none, then we have a recommendation before us. I'm not going to read out the 11 conditions. We're going to remove condition 7 because it is on municipal water, correct? Yes, okay. So could we have a motion to approve that recommendation with that amendment? Moved by Councillor Nordoff, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Okay, so we have a recommendation that council adjourn the Committee of Adjustment meeting at 7:10 p.m. and reconvene into a regular session of council. Could I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Jennifer. Okay, so next up we have item 5B, the 2023 audited financial statements. And I think at this time, would we turn that over to Jennifer and Scott, if they're still on the screen, if you'd like to speak to that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I am Jennifer Buchanan. Scott is unfortunately unable to join us this evening. I am the engagement partner for this audit and have been for the last several years. I'm pleased once again to be here in the month of May. Congratulations definitely to Johnny and his team for ensuring we were able to have a smooth and timely audit. I am going to share my screen and walk through the audited financial statements. I think many of you have seen my presentation style before. I will present highlights, but if at any time you have a question, please let me know, and I'm happy to pause and address it as we go through. After we go through the financial statements, there are a few required comments I have to make, so I will make those after we've gone through the statements. Okay, so these are the audited financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2023. This page, I know it's probably small on your screen, but it's management's responsibility for financial reporting. So this is something that is signed right in the front of the financial statements. It's signed by the CAO and the treasurer, just indicating that all the information that has been provided is ultimately the responsibility of management, and that's consistent with prior year. We then turn to page 2, which is the independent auditor's report. So this is actually what we've been engaged to do, which is to provide an opinion on the audited financial statements. It is addressed to the members of council, inhabitants, and ratepayers of the Corporation of the Township of Adelaide Metcalfe. And it indicates that in our opinion, the municipality's financial statements do present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the municipality as at December 31st, 2023, results of operations and its cash flows for the year then ended in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So that is a clean audit opinion. The remainder of the auditor's report goes through the different responsibilities, so responsibilities of management, which would be represented by the CAO and treasurer, those charged with governance, which is represented by council, as well as my responsibilities as the auditor. Assuming these statements are approved in this meeting, they will be dated today, May 21st, 2024. Turning to the statement of financial position, I am going to immediately show you that the 2022 numbers have been restated as the result of a prior period adjustment. We will look at that closer when we get to note 17, but because it's going to come up in a few spots, I'm going to just mention that it does relate to the Highway 81 Center Road loans that were done. They had been shown on a net basis previously, and it was determined that they should be shown on a gross basis between the debt and the receivables, and so that will be better disclosed, and we'll talk about it when we get to note 17, but I did just want to point that out right off the bat. The second thing I wanted to point out right out the bat is there were a few changes to public sector accounting standards for this year end. So there's going to be a few things that I point out, particularly when we get to note 1 to the statements, what all the changes were. There is an entirely new statement. So just letting you know that you have adopted all of the required changes based on the changes to accounting standards. The treasurer was involved in that and did attend specific training on that as well. So was also informed on what was required to be changed during the year. Okay, with all those things out of the way, we will look at the statement of financial position. So this is the assets and liabilities of the municipality at a point in time, in this case, December 31st, 2023. I'm not going to point out each number. I'm just going to point out some of the significant variances. You can see taxes receivable. We see a bit of an increase there. There is one large amount that is considered to be potentially uncollectible, and there's a tax sale likely for that situation. Other than that, no concerns sitting in taxes receivable. Total financial assets up to $14.4 million. When we get down to financial liabilities, you can see we have a bit of a decrease in deferred revenue. When we get to note 6, we'll look at that, but in general, that's the spending of amounts that have been received in previous years. There were opportunities to spend some of that money, for example, parkland funding in the current year, so it was brought into regular revenue. Here's where we see our first really big significant change due to the new accounting standards. So we used to have this landfill closure and post-closure liability, which was an amount based on a third-party report estimating what the eventual costs would be to restore the landfill locations. And the way the old accounting standards worked was that each year you just added a little bit more to that amount, and so that eventually, as you paid those amounts, it would sort of match up with the expenses. There is a new accounting standard. It's called asset retirement obligation. So it's the same landfill, just a different accounting standard. And now what's required under the new standard is that you have a similar report that estimates what the eventual costs are. But as soon the day you open a landfill, which obviously was sometime in the past, you do book the entire expected cost of that ultimate remediation onto the financial statements. There is a piece under assets, and there's also a piece here under liabilities, asset retirement obligation, landfill. So it is a different way of accounting for it completely, results in a much larger liability as well as the corresponding asset. And then we will adjust that each year by something called accretion expense, where it is going to be trued up based on the present value of the amount. So again, we still have the same landfill. We still have a very similar future liability. It's just a completely different way of accounting for it, which was required by the changes to public sector accounting standards. Okay, so obviously that change there from the just under 300,000 to 786 really is the bulk of the change in financial liabilities. Turning our attention to non-financial assets. No significant real changes to tangible capital assets. Obviously, we have some additions that we'll see in note 12, and then inventories and prepaid expenses. So we have our total non-financial assets, 19.6 million, and our accumulated surplus of 31.7 million. Okay, not seeing any questions, so I'm going to keep going. So we get to the statement of operations and accumulated surplus. I'll do my regular reminder that Note 21 takes the original council approved budget and then makes it a PSAB budget, which is what we've disclosed here. And one of the main changes that we make is for capital. So we take capital out of expenses for our PSAB budget because for PSAB purposes, those are capitalized. Looking through the statements in terms of significant changes under government transfers, provincial, we do have an increase over prior year and over budget. And that's the result of that ability to use up some of those deferred revenue amounts. So amounts we'd received in previous years, we were now able to spend them. And so they've gone into revenue in the current year. Other municipalities, there was a change to a previously expected amount. So that went through there, and that's why it's sitting at a negative position there. Investment income. Hopefully you all have some personal investments as well, and you know that due to the interest rate increases, in general, investment income is up, particularly in the lower risk type investments like Adelaide Metcalfe has. So we see the increase there in investment income. We see a decrease in penalties and interest on taxes because collections have been pretty good. So that's actually a good thing, although a little less revenue for the municipality. So we have total revenues there of 6.9 million. In terms of our expenses, the main one I wanted
Jennifer, can I
Yep.
just interrupt you for a second?
Absolutely.
The revenue under other, what is that capturing?
So that includes some other fees. I'm trying to think what else is in there. It's sort of like one-off types fees and that kind of thing.
Because it looks like it's on track to be similar to last year, so.
Yes, it is. And it's the
Okay.
type of thing that you don't tend to budget for because you don't know exactly what you're going to get. And relative to everything else, it's pretty small dollar value. So
Okay,
I'm just looking at it here on my other screen.
I'm sorry, I probably asked you this last year. Don't remember.
Yeah, so it's sort of a little bit of interest income is in there, donations that are received, other collections, those types of things. So there's not one large item, there's sort of quite a few other
Right.
items.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, so looking at expenses, the main thing I want to point out, because it does look unusual, is the negative under agriculture. So council may recall that I believe it was 2 years ago in 2021, there was a large allowance done related to drains because we weren't sure of the collectability of some of the older drain work that had been done. So that allowance had been set up at that time. In 2023, management was confident and we agreed that that allowance was no longer required, that it seemed like collectability was not going to be an issue. So therefore that 260,000 that was previously allowed for was recovered, was reversed in the current year. So that's why Under agriculture, we see that negative amount.
Jennifer, sorry, excuse me. So that doesn't take into consideration the refunds that we had to provide due to the MPAC reassessments? That's
No,
not captured there?
This was more relating to grants that
Grain?
we weren't sure we'd still be eligible to receive, and then luckily we were.
Okay.
The other piece I'll point out, because it is lower than prior year in budget, is garbage collection and disposal. So one of the adjustments that goes through there for PSAB purposes does relate in that big change from the old way of doing landfills to the new way of doing landfills. So it's not a cash expense for your purposes or anything like that, but it does go against the expenses that were incurred because of the change from moving it from a current expense to a very old expense. Okay, so total expenses there, 5.1 million, annual surplus 1.8 million. And again, we'll see the breakout of this in the schedule of segmented disclosures at the end of the statements as well. I'll also point out here, you can see the impact of that prior period adjustment that I mentioned going through the prior period. And again, we'll look at that a little closer when we get to note 17. Okay. Statement of change in net financial assets. Nothing really here I want to point out other than you're going to see that asset retirement obligation hitting here as well as the prior period adjustment. So some of the unusual things that happened during the year. This statement is new, statement of remeasurement gains and losses. It is required to be in PSAB statements, even though in your case there's nothing on it. I agree that looks silly. It's not my decision. So this is a new statement. Where a municipality would use this statement is if their investment policy allowed for investments in marketable securities, where you have a difference between original cost and fair value. You would put the unrealized gain or loss, so the difference between cost and fair value, would get booked to this statement. As Adelaide Metcalfe's investments are in GICs, that's not something that's happening under your investments, so that's why there's nothing on this statement. There's a few other things that can go through this statement, but in your case, there's nothing applicable. It's a lot to say about a blank statement. Statement of cash flows, not really going to touch on, other than, again, you're going to see that landfill closure has an impact here as well. Okay. So now we get into the notes to the financial statements. And this is where note 1 outlines all the different changes that were adopted this year. And again, they were all required due to changes under Canadian public sector accounting standards. So there was PS 1201, which is the new statement of remeasurement gains and losses. There's PS 3280, asset retirement obligations. So that affected you based on the landfills. And then there's PS 3450, which is financial instruments. The main changes that you're going to see is a lot more note disclosure, which again, wasn't my choosing. It was required by the new standards. Okay. Continuing to note 2, there's no actual changes to the policies of the municipality other than those impacted by the new PSAB standards. And so where you're going to see that is under financial instruments. So it starts at the bottom of page 11, but really going into the top of page 12. So this is where you're going to have to identify what all the financial instruments are. And then there's fair value levels 1, 2, and 3. And it sort of talks about how they have been accounted for. So this is really some increased disclosure from the way the former standards required. The other change that comes up in note 2 is going to relate to those asset retirement obligations. Again, because having a landfill is not new to you, we were able to just sort of repurpose the old wording and make sure it meets the requirements of the new requirement for AROs. Okay, so turning our attention to the notes. So investments, so as I mentioned, most of them in GICs. That's why we don't have any fair value changes. And this is where you see investments are classified as level 2. So that's part of the new financial instrument standards. Notes 4 and 5 really are just breaking out some of the receivable amounts into more detail. And note 6, deferred revenue. So this includes obligatory reserve funds. They are required to be part of deferred revenue. So again, we see a decrease in some of the amounts compared to prior year. It's because there was some opportunity to spend those amounts during the year. And we also see the inclusion of the development charges, which is an obligatory reserve fund. So it is required to be under deferred revenue for accounting purposes. Note 8 is contingent liabilities. This is very similar wording to the past. This is the generic wording that we put when outcomes are unknown, but there are legal actions outstanding. So this is the bare minimum, I guess, of what we are required to disclose. As part of our work over contingent liabilities, we, of course, talk to the treasurer and the CAO, as well as sending legal letters just to ensure that if there was an amount that could be quantified or a likelihood was known, we would report the correct thing in the statements. In this case, what we're saying is we can't determine the amount or the final outcome. Okay, note 9, net long-term liabilities. This is consistent with previous years, as is note 10 for trust funds. Note 11 is asset retirement obligation, landfill closure. So again, this is very similar type disclosure to what we had under the old standards, but it's now been updated for the new standards. It's showing what the opening balance was, what the accretion expense is, and then the closing balance. And this is what you're seeing on the statement of financial position. One thing that may be of interest to council is just comparing what the long-term asset retirement obligation could be versus the reserve balance. Again, this is a future expense, so it's not expected that you would have this amount in reserves yet, but just something to be aware of. Tangible capital assets, this shows the additions during the year. And then we have our accumulated surplus. Again, I'm just going to point out that if that impact of the old landfill amount, which was here, and then now the asset retirement obligation. I know it comes up a lot of spots in these financial statements. Okay. Prior period adjustment, note 17. So this is where I mentioned that it was previously done on a net basis between the debenture receivable and debenture recoverable. This was identified to be an error in the prior period. So as a result, this change has been made. So you can see the impact on the opening accumulated surplus. Note 19 is a commitment, so that just you have entered into a purchase agreement for a new truck. Was expected to be delivered before the end of December 2023, but was delivered in 2024. So just when you have such a large material commitment, we do disclose it in the financial statements. Financial instruments. So this disclosure is actually pretty similar to what we used to have. There was not a lot of required changes. Budget figures, note 21. So this is where we have the original budget as approved by council, and then we make the changes such as capital assets in order to change it into a PSAB budget. We describe all the different categories for the segmented disclosure, and then we show the segmented disclosure here. So all the revenues and then expenses for each amount. And this is where I'm going to point out two lines. One is that $260,000 recovery that I was mentioning. And the other, well, much smaller, is the accretion. So that's where we're going to see that amount relating to the ARO, and there'll be an amount there each year. So that brings me to the end of my financial statement presentation. I know it was just the highlights, but if there were any questions, I'm happy to take those now.
Thank you, Jennifer. Are there any questions? I know I interrupted along the way. I apologize for that.
No,
Sorry.
that's what I like. It's easier to do it while you're there.
Oh, yeah. Councillor Kingma?
Yeah, through the mayor, to Johnny, actually, I'm glad management found the discrepancy in the Highway 81 debenture. Do we know how that arose?
Through Mayor Clark to Councillor Kingma. Yeah, we did some digging in those historical schedules. As Jen mentioned, it was factored in on a net basis historically on the financial statements. But just for presentation purposes, we felt it would be better shown so we can understand what our true receivables were when we first entered into or constructed that infrastructure, the township did have debt that we no longer have that debt that's been repaid, but there is still a receivable outstanding from those residents along Highway 81.
Okay, thank you. And I think I won't get into specifics, but your team has done a very good job reviewing all of the paperwork, I guess that's a nice way to say it, to make sure that things are operating as they should and things are being corrected or enhanced when you find them, improved, I guess is a nice way to say it. Okay, any other questions for Jennifer? Okay, seeing none then, we have a recommendation that council approve the 2023 audited financial statements as presented. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Moved by Councillor Nordoff, seconded by Councillor Kingma. All in favor, and that's carried. Thanks for your time, Jennifer. We appreciate it, and it was a pleasure working with you. So thank you very much.
Thank you. My final comments are just that as part of the audit, we do also provide council with an audit findings letter. There are no issues to report, but I do like to say that for the record. It goes through whether there was any disagreements with management, suggested changes to accounting policies other than those that were required, etc. And there are no issues to report, but I just wanted to make sure I said that as well.
Yes, thank you. Well, I was in the office the one day, and it must have been Scott that was here, I think, and asking lots of questions, and everybody seemed to be cooperating. So it was a good, we have a good relationship with you, I guess. That's all I'll say. So, okay, well, have a good night. Thanks again, Jennifer.
Thank you very much.
Take
Good
care.
night. Bye.
Okay, next up, item 6. We already did that. Yeah, it was Councillor Nordoff and Councillor Kim. Okay, next up under correspondence, item 6, upcoming conferences, seminars and meetings. The next regular council meeting for Adelaide Metcalfe is on Monday, June the 17th at 7 p.m. Then there is also going to be a meeting at the County of Middlesex in reference to development charges. It's a public meeting. These are development charges imposed by the county, not by the municipality. They would be over and above. That is on the 26th, Wednesday, June 26th at 1 p.m. And that is in the council chambers at 399 Rideout Street. And then Adelaide Metcalfe meeting of council, the one after that will be on July the 15th at 7 p.m. 6B, recommended readings, CC number 1, Asaba Bayfield Maitland Valley Source Protection Region. There's a municipal newsletter dated May 2024. CC number 2, Asaba Bayfield Conservation Authority, Annual General Meeting Minutes dated April 18th, 2024. And CC number 3 is from the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus, and that is a submission to the Environmental Registry. And CSAF under action required, CC number 4. Pardon me, we have a resolution. They're requesting support for a multi-municipal energy working group in reference to an unwilling host for wind energy projects. Okay, so could I have a motion to receive and file CC 1, 2, 3, and 4? Moved by Councillor Nordoff, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor? And that's carried. Okay, next up is item 7, staff reports. It's the first quarter 2024 building activity summary. And we have for the first time Wayne Yisbert, Deputy Chief Building Official with us tonight. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Wayne, and welcome.
Thank you. Thank you to the Mayor and Council for having me tonight. I'm here to present the first quarter building report. We did start off significantly slower than we did in 2023. In 2023, we saw 5 new dwelling starts, and in 2024, we have seen none in the first quarter. This is pretty standard what we've seen in the rest of the municipalities, but we are confidently expecting to see a turn and it starting to get a little busier. That pretty much concludes this short report. If I'm open to any questions that you, council or Mary, you have.
Okay, are there, and I think the report's self-explanatory, but are there any questions for Wayne? Okay, seeing none, we have a recommendation that the first quarter 2024 building activity summary be received for information. Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Nordoff. All in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, Wayne, thanks for coming. I don't know if there's a hockey game tonight or anyway, you're free to go, but thank you very much for attending.
Thank you so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Okay, next up is 7B, operating budget to actual for April 2024, and I'll turn it over to Johnny Pereira, our treasurer.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through the council, as you mentioned there, we have the April 2024 budget actual report, which is the first month of Q2. As mentioned with the last report, we are still fairly early in the year. So from an expense side of things, they are pretty low as a number of our expenses are incurred over the summer months in public works. But to date, spending and revenue collection looks to be on pace with the approved budget. But I'd be happy to answer any questions. The recommendation is to receive the report as presented.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for Johnny? I know it's such a small number, but the park revenue's gone up a little bit. But I mean, it's nice people are using it too. Every time I go by, there's lots of people there, so that's good. Okay, if there's no questions for Johnny, then we have a recommendation that the operating budget to actual report for April 2024 be received for information. Moved by Councillor McKinnon, seconded by Councillor Nordoff. All in favor, and that's carried. Thank you. Okay, is there any other business? Councillor Kingma?
Through the mayor to Barnier, if you don't mind, I'll ask a question or two. Where's our standing with the new procedural bylaw update?
Through the mayor to Councillor Kingma, good question. We did discuss earlier. I'm hoping the next council meeting in June. I just did last week take a course on procedural bylaws. I had mostly written, but it's good to see what others are doing and just best practices. But hopefully next meeting we'll have one presented to council.
And just briefly, has the 2023 council remuneration been posted on the website?
I believe so. I can follow up with that. Okay, I can double check and make sure it's on there.
Okay, I don't really have a lot for other business. I attended the OPP board meeting, our initial one today, and I'll have something further to report at our next meeting. So we'll just leave it at that because we have to. Anyway, we're moving along, but there's confidential stuff, so we're not there yet to release that information. And also, I had the pleasure of attending the Canadian Association of Mental Health office on Richmond Street in Strathroy on Thursday. And we had our MCERT people were there, OPP, Aaron, who's been at our situation table, Aaron Tuffin. And I think I wouldn't be exaggerating if I said there was about 15 different organizations represented. So when you look at mental health, you do not realize how wide that corridor really is when so what I did also is I got some business cards and some brochures that we'll add to our inventory upstairs for the public, everything from the Women's Rural Resource Center to teen help, the search center, like there's 15 different organizations at least. And we even had the Josh from the county, the community navigator was there, and he spoke about the services and the 81 the Countryside Hotel here, the service it provides. So I think we can be proud of the services that are available. And I think some of them are probably the best kept secret, but for anybody needing help, please reach out to the township office if that's something that we can assist in. So. Okay, if there's nothing else, we have a recommendation that bylaw 35 of 2024, confirming May 21st, 2024, receive first, second, third, and final reading. Could I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All in favor, and that's carried. And I have a recommendation that the meeting be adjourned at 7:41 p.m. Moved by Councillor Kingma, seconded by Councillor McKinnon. All